With the NBA playoffs getting closer to an end and the offseason getting closer and closer to starting, I want to dive in and look at every single NBA team, analyzing them last season and going over what they could do in the offseason to get better or to stay the path that they want to go down if they are looking to get worse. We're going to be doing this for every single NBA team, and we're going to be starting this off with the Washington Wizards. Welcome back to this episode here on Swish City. I am Bruce Veliz, and I've been wanting to do this for a while here on the channel, but I haven't gotten to it, and today just felt like the day to just kind of get it started, rip it off like a band-aid, and continue to get these videos rolling for you guys. So I'm going to start doing these for you guys once again in the off season, and we're going to continue to get uploads here on Swish City. So if you enjoy the content, let me know what you think down below in the comment section. If you are a Wizards fan, let me know if I analyze your team correctly. And without further ado, let's dive into it. So like I mentioned, we're going to be discussing the Washington Wizards, and the Wizards were a little bit of a questionable team this season. If you want to look at their record, obviously 18-64, not great in the Eastern Conference, absolutely bottom of the barrel, but with a young kind of core and with the ability to add veterans at the trade deadline, they actually showcased themselves to be a pretty solid team in a squad that looks to have a lot of upwards potential going into next season, even if it's not obviously a play-in team or a team that's in the contention for the playoffs. This is the first time in a while for Wizards fans they can actually see the building blocks and foundation of this team really being built, since they have seen it since John Wall, Bradley Beal, and those Marcin Gortat days, which I think is really great for the fans and the franchise overall, specifically as the Wizards have been kind of, once again, towards the bottom of the barrel these last couple of seasons. And like I mentioned, they have a lot of these young guys that can really hit these big time shots. A lot of great players on this roster. So let's look and dive into this Washington Wizards team. I'm going to be using these graphics courtesy of Bobby Marks of ESPN. They're absolutely fantastic, and they kind of give you the whole offseason preview for each team. And shout out to him or whoever makes these graphics for him, because they are absolutely fantastic. I use them basically for discussing every team, and it always helps me analyze kind of what the team can do for the future. And if you want to look at it, we do see that the Wizards are mainly retaining a lot of their players this offseason, right? They have Bub Carrington, who's a rookie. They have Alexander Sarr, who was their number 2 overall pick last year. And they also have Keyshawn George, who was a 17th round pick last year as well, who was a solid rookie. But they also got AJ Johnson in that Kyle Kuzma deal alongside Chris Middleton, who was a really, really solid fit. Bilal Coulibaly, their lottery pick from the year previous, had some great flashes of some youth potential on the offensive and defensive side throughout the season. And they also had some guys that kind of made themselves names here, as well as some undervalued guys. Now, obviously, they have a lot of salary, only paying $181 million. They are under the first apron at this moment. So they could look to bring back key free agents like Malcolm Brogdon. Chris Middleton does have that player option, so I do expect him to accept it. And maybe even those two-way guys towards the bottom there, guys in Tristan Vukovic and JT Thor. But they could also let some of those guys go and reevaluate this roster, bringing in some new veterans, which is something that I'm going to discuss just in a little bit. Now, if you want to look at their draft, obviously these screenshots were posted pre-draft lottery, so unfortunately for the Washington Wizards, they did not get the number 2 overall pick like they were projected to do. So unfortunately for the Wizards, they landed pick number 6, and they absolutely fell. Teams like the Mavericks, Spurs, and Sixers all jumped, which was really, really catastrophic for some of these top teams that were competing for Cooper Flag. But the Wizards are still going to be able to get a high-value player with this lottery pick as well, and I think is going to continue to add it to their nucleus core of young guys that they've obviously previously drafted in those last couple seasons, like I mentioned, in Bub Carrington, Bilal Coulibaly, Alexander Sarr, Keyshawn George, and AJ Johnson, someone that was in last year's draft class that they got in that Kyle Kuzma trade. So for the next part of the video, we're going to kind of look at some players that I think could be moved from this Washington Wizards team. And I wouldn't say 100% these guys are going to get moved, but I think they have the possibility of doing so with the Wizards potentially drafting a player to replace said role, or for the potential of the Wizards maybe adding some more of this role, and you'll get what I'm kind of saying. But let's get into that here. Like I mentioned, Chris Middleton has that player option. He's most likely going to accept it. Maybe the Wizards halfway through the season look to trade Chris Middleton on that, expiring deal that is that player option. But he fit like a glove, like I said, with this Wizards team, kind of being a little bit of a mentor for Keyshawn George, playing that shooting forward role as well. And like I mentioned, going alongside Bilal Coulibaly, a lengthy power forward who's really solid on the defensive side. He can ultimately fit in like a glove. So the first person that I think potentially could get traded is Marcus Smart. Now, they acquired Smart at the deadline last season, just jumping into a trade, absorbing him into a salary. And he was a great fit, once again, kind of similarly like Chris Middleton, playing alongside these guards in Jordan Poole, Bilal Coulibaly, being that veteran mentor. Now, Smart, I think, does have a big chance of staying with the Wizards, and I don't really see them moving off of him. But the only way that I could see them technically moving off of Marcus Smart is potentially packaging him in a deal with one of these other guys that I mentioned, or one of their low value contracts that, don't really play that much for this Wizards team, in the ability to get a maybe more profound veteran for this roster, right? And there are some names that are going to be circling around. I don't necessarily know if this trade actually happens, but potentially a guy like Drew Holiday from the Boston Celtics makes a little bit more money. The Wizards could absorb that money and get a key veteran, a guy that the Celtics replaced Marcus Smart for already with Drew Holiday. But once again, the Wizards kind of doing that here, adding a guy who is a little bit better of a three-point shooter, a little bit more of a leader for this locker room as well. But not only just that, a solid defensive player alongside Marcus Smart. Now, there's some other players as well, like I mentioned, Jordan Poole is one I'd keep an eye on if I were Washington Wizards fans, even though he really does fit in with this culture as that young player. The Wizards could look to get off the best value from Poole, as originally his first season with the Wizards was not great, but his second season last year was absolutely fantastic. He was able to revitalize his career a little bit with the Wizards and really find his strides with the team as a shot creator and a playmaker for this Washington Wizards team alongside Bob Carrington. And I think that Poole kind of fits in with this team as well. I wouldn't be shocked, but maybe the Wizards see he has a 1+1. They can kind of get off of this contract a little bit easier, and maybe they feel this is the time to strike with Jordan Poole to kind of get either some other bad contracts back or potentially a draft pick that could really help out this team. And there are some draft picks that we will talk about in a little bit as well that maybe could replace Jordan Poole's effectiveness as a shot creator and scorer if the Washington Wizards went to make that move. But ultimately, I think there's one guy to really keep an eye on for this Washington Wizards team as a trade piece, and that is Corey Kispert. Now, Kispert is a great 3-and-D scorer, and you might be thinking, why would the Wizards want to trade that? Well, once again, the Wizards already have some guys in Chris Middleton who can do that role, Keyshawn George, who's growing into that, and Justin Champagnie, who's on a non-guaranteed deal, who also has been able to provide that in pretty solid defense as well for this Washington Wizards team. With Saddiq Bey also coming back from injuries, if he is not swindled in a trade potentially by the deadline, I could see a guy like Corey Kispert having some value similar to a guy like Denny Avdija last year, where for the Wizards, where then he was ultimately traded to the Blazers. I think that the Wizards kind of see Corey Kispert not really fitting into this timeline, and he could still help out some quality teams around the league and has some value as well on a pretty solid contract of $13 million. So I think a player like Corey Kispert should be on the radar for Wizards fans to potentially be moved in the possibility of getting either some draft capital back to kind of help out this little bit of a rebuild, or potentially find a role that they do not have on this roster. But Wizards fans, let me know what your thoughts down below in the comment section are on Marcus Smart, Jordan Poole, and Corey Kispert. I want to know what you guys really think about these guys on the trade market, because ultimately I'm not tapped into Wizards as much as you guys are. And now we're going to talk about the draft pick. And at pick 6 here, I think there's a lot of options for the Washington Wizards, and I think a lot of options are going to present themselves. Now, obviously, with this kind of draft here, I'm not going to kind of factor in some trades. So Dallas would obviously take Cooper Flagg. San Antonio is going to take Dylan Harper. I think Ace Bailey is going to go to the Sixers, and Charlotte's going to end up with VJ Edgecombe. I think those kind of top 4 are really locked. But after that top 4, not only with the uncertainty of Utah potentially trading up or some of these teams flipping, but also the uncertainty of who the true number 5 overall pick is really not really confirmed. And I think that leaves a lot of possibility for the Washington Wizards to land some guys that could realistically help them, that could fall, or potentially maybe just be the right guy that they think is going to be drafting at 6. So we're going to look at 4 guys, 2 guys that I think would be very solid fits, and then 2 guys who are kind of been mocked to this team, and I want to kind of go over that as well. So the first player we're going to talk about is Con Kneppel, and I think Kneppel would be, once again, another great fit for this Washington Wizards team. He could learn kind of alongside the links of Keyshawn George, who was a little bit of a shooting small forward for them. Kneppel obviously playing probably the 2 guard here in the NBA, would kind of get accustomed to that role and could maybe be this new kind of version of a Bradley Beal for Washington Wizards fans to really buy into on the offensive side of things. He's also a little bit bigger in size, so I think he could help out on the defensive side. And once again, he kind of overlaps with the guy in Corey Kispert. So that's why I ultimately think they could look to move off of a guy in Kispert as well. But if the Wizards don't think they need any more offense, don't want to add any more shooting in a pretty solid shooting league, they could also look at the likes of Kaman Malawak. And Malawak, also a teammate of Con Canepo, who went to Duke, is an athletic, rim-protecting big. He's going to be an absolute beast, and I think he could fit pretty solidly alongside Alexander Sarr, who once said when he was drafted that he wanted to play power forward in the NBA. Brings that offensive versatility. They could run a front court of Malawak and Alexander Sarr, have that size of 2 7-footers down low in the paint, kind of competing with the modern NBA version of those double bigs that we've kind of seen dominating in the playoffs. But not only just that, would allow their number 2 overall pick to go back to his role and fill out a hole that they have as a rim protecting big since they got rid of guys like Valanciunas and haven't really had one since Marcin Gortat with those John Wall and Bradley Beal days. And then lastly, these two guys are kind of projected to go with the Wizards in some mock drafts, so I wanted to look at them as well. I don't necessarily know if these would really scream to me as perfect fits. I think Canepo and a guy like Malawak would be a little bit better, but a guy like Trey Johnson, who's projected to go number 5 in most mock drafts, is a solid shot creator and scorer that the Washington Wizards could kind of bring in over Con Canepo if they feel like they still want to have that playmaking spot, but also a true shooting guard kind of guy. Johnson, if he does fall to 6, would be an absolute snipe for the Washington Wizards, as he is projected to go top 5 at the moment, but I think he would be a great piece, and ultimately, along the other guy that we're going to mention, could result in potential a Jordan Poole exit for the Wizards. And once again, this guy, Jeremiah Fears, the freshman from Oklahoma, absolute sensation on the offensive side of the ball, being able to create his own shot and just be a relentless scorer, is also mocked to the Washington Wizards. And like I said, him or a guy like Trey Johnson could be that Jordan Poole replacement if you're the Washington Wizards saying, hey, we can get a guy who can play this role like Jordan Poole similarly on a rookie deal at our pick. And we're just going to bring that in and look to try to trade a guy like Jordan Poole, potentially a guy like Marcus Smart, maybe even both of them combined in a contract to try to bring in either a bad salary or some veteran type players that can really help out this sound team of Bilal Coulibaly, Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George, and one of these scoring guards in Jeremiah Fears and or Trey Johnson. But ultimately, I do think the Washington Wizards are going to have a lot of interest here with their draft pick. It's going to be a very, very fun offseason for the Washington Wizards, in my opinion. I'm very excited to see what they can do this offseason. Like I said, they had a really great second half of the year with bringing in these veterans, and I still think they're going to keep continuing with that mold. So maybe some of these guys do stay, but adding some young talent to a team that already looks like it's going to be on the rise, even if it's not, a lottery team next year, just showing some development, showing some growth, showing that this team has an actual direction is not only key for NBA fans around the world, but for those Washington Wizards fans who invest so much time into their hometown club. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. I didn't really go into any free agents that I think the Wizards could add, but honestly, with them kind of having a full roster, if we want to dive back and look at this here once again, doesn't really make sense for the Wizards to really add some guys. Maybe a guy like Malcolm Brogdon kind of leaves, goes to another team. That's okay for the Wizards to lose, but maybe they do bring him back. Ultimately, there are a lot of questions diving into this team. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section if you're a Wizards fan. Hope I didn't butcher your team that much, and I hope you guys can be respectful with my thoughts. Once again, we're going to be having these videos come out for you guys hopefully every single day, but I will be trying to get these videos for every single team leading up to the draft, kind of leading up to free agency, so we can kind of paint a picture of what these teams should do this offseason, and then ultimately, once the offseason comes, kind of evaluate what these teams did, and ultimately see if these teams made the right moves or if they made the wrong moves. Like I said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm Bruce Veliz, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.